A Piece of the Action was a strange mix for a Star Trek episode. Its theme was serious, the contamination of a planet's culture by the crew of a starship. But writer David Harmon and writer-producer Gene Kuhn took a decidedly humorous tone. The story's premise took us back 100 years when a Federation vessel visited a planet whose inhabitants modeled their culture after a book titled Chicago Mobs of the 20s. This book was mistakenly left behind by a Federation crew. Fast forward to the 23rd century when the Enterprise landing party beamed down to investigate this contamination. Get ready for a piece of the action.
Energize.
The name of the episode was A Piece of the Action, and I play the character of Kalo. Kalo was one of the henchmen who captures the crew when they first come down to this street. They visited a gangster planet.
Okay, you three. Let's see you petrified.
Sir, would you mind explaining that statement, please?
I want to see it turn to stone. Put your hands over your head. Or you ain't gonna have no head to put your hands over.
In the beginning, I pick up Spock and the rest of the crew, and I'm escorting them to the office of my boss. We walk down the street, and people are shooting at each other, and it's a real gangster kind of a milieu. Even Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock, looked around and said, "What's going on? What's going on here?" It's a totally different kind of a culture.
Sir, does everyone here carry firearms?
I never heard such stupid questions in my life.
And finally, I take them to the headquarters, and it is explained that we run the town, and people pay homage to us by giving us a piece of the action. Whoever has a business gives us a piece of the action, you see, and that's henceforth the title.
You bloodthirsty Saracen! What have you done, Scotty?
Scotty was my teacher at the neighborhood playhouse many years ago. I went to the neighborhood playhouse. Sanford Meisner was the head man, and one of his assistants was...
Lieutenant, keep away from that, Scotty!
Jimmy Doohan. And Jimmy was my teacher for a couple of years there. And then years later, I came out here, and Jimmy was an actor.
Where's Tom?
I don't know. He got out just as the guy...
And so on and so forth. And it's just very unusual that Jimmy was the assistant to Sanford Meisner, and he ended up being Scotty.
What are you doing, woman?
Leave me alone!
Have you gone down?
But you know, when it comes down to me doing a lot of different voices and different things, I absolutely denied the fact that I would ever be typecast, because I could do so many things.
Can't do, sweetheart. Can do, Captain.
In '71, I'd go out and read for people. And I'd walk into an office and the secretary would say, "Oh, hi, Scotty." First time that ever happened, right? And it didn't bother me at all. But as it kept on, all the secretaries kept saying, "Oh, hi, Scotty, hi, Scotty, hi, Scotty," and everything else, and I wasn't getting any jobs. That's because they weren't writing Scottish parts in those days. And I didn't work on the screen for nearly 3 years.
And I haven't seen Scotty in hours.
Fortunately, I got a play in San Francisco that ran for 11 months, and that was a very pucka British part. And I got rave reviews from it. Variety gave me the most succinct review I've ever received. James Doohan was superb. So, hey, how can you beat that, right? So that's my answer to being typecast.
We did it, you and me. Put him right under the table.
The original story idea for this episode came from an article that writer David Harmon had read in the New Yorker magazine. Then Gene Coon did an uncredited rewrite with Kirk and Spock really getting into playing gangsters. One of the more priceless moments in this episode is Captain Kirk's attempt to drive a vintage car. This very funny scene was the only time in Star Trek history that any Enterprise crew member used a surface vehicle for transportation. Apparently, he's much better at flying a starship than driving an ordinary car.
The name of the game is called Fizbin.
Fizbin.
One of the scenes that people remember so well, we played a game there called Fizbin, in which Captain Kirk tries to disarm me by playing this game of Fizbin, which is not really a game.
The second card is turned up, except on Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
It's something he made up. He said you can play it on Thursday except on Sunday, but Friday is okay. And
Each player gets 6 cards, except for the dealer, the player on the dealer's right, who gets 7.
On the right.
he would do a lot of double talking.
If you didn't get another jack, if you had gotten a king, why, then you'd get another card, except when it's dark, when you'd have to give it back.
If it were dark on Tuesday.
And at one point, he said, "You understand?" And a friend of mine, Jack Donner, who also played one of the characters in one of the Star Trek episodes,
Weapons officer, bring main batteries to bear on the Enterprise.
said, "Why don't you use this? When he says to you, 'Do you understand? Do this.'"
You got that?
What?
Which we did.
What?
And it was hilarious.
What?
For the show, and it's become a thing with Jack and I.
We were actors, and we were delighted to be working.
Whenever we see each other, we walk. I say, "Hi, Jack," and he'll say, "What?"
What?
Which is kind of funny for us, not for you.
By Thanksgiving of the second season, Gene Coon had left the show. And prior to his departure, both Coon and Roddenberry had been at odds. Coon pushed for more humor, and Roddenberry pushed for more issue-oriented dramatic storylines. Piece of the Action owes its humor to Coon and director James Comack. Comack was a natural choice to direct this episode due to his many television comedy credits, including My Favorite Martian and The Dick Van Dyke Show. Together, we were all a most effective comedy team exploring 20th century hijinks. You get what I mean?
What happens when two cultures collide? In the jungles of South America and Africa, there are examples of cultures that lived in blissful ignorance of our idea of civilization until they were exposed to its influences. Now, these cultures have deteriorated and lost the individuality that once made them unique. There are few sights stranger than a Yanomamo Indian wearing a Nike t-shirt. Of course, in Star Trek, the pollution of a culture is against the Prime Directive. And when it happens, it's up to the crew of the USS Enterprise to get things back in order. But in this case, they also get a piece of the action. The city streets of Chicago in this episode were actually known as the New York streets on the Paramount back lot. We also shot Miri and City on the Edge of Forever on the same streets. And over the years, they were dressed and redressed in countless films. Coincidentally, these buildings burned down during the shooting of Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. It had nothing to do with us since we weren't using them, but all the same, it was sad to see this part of Hollywood history reduced to ashes. A piece of the action is considered one of the funniest episodes of Star Trek. It ranks right up there with The Trouble with Tribbles among fans' favorites. Of course, the thing I remember about shooting this episode is that I was always worried about losing my hat. I had difficulty keeping it comfortably seated on my head. I couldn't bring it down far enough because the tips of my ears kept hitting the brim. And that's why you won't see many felt hats on Vulcan.